My son said he wasn't expecting me for Christmas. So I canceled the mortgage payment. The elders tell us that family is the fire we gather around when the world grows cold. But this winter, my own son was the one who told me to stay out in the snow. It was the middle of the long snow's moon. The pines outside my window were heavy with white. I called my son, my heart ready to ask what gifts I could bring for the grandchildren, what stories they wished to hear by the fire. But his words were not warm. They were sharp like ice breaking on a frozen river. "Father," he said, "we were not expecting you this year." His voice was not heavy with sorrow. It was light and firm, as if he had practiced saying it. I held the phone and the silence in my own kitchen grew loud. "Not expecting me?" he sighed. It was the sound of a man who has already closed a door in his mind. "Listen, Father, it is better if you stay at your place. The children are older, we want to do things our own way." He paused, and then came the words that struck the stone. "It is our gathering now." I leaned against the wall. The wood felt cold. With those words, my own son had taken my name from the council fire. He had made me a stranger to my own blood. Before we continue this story, I ask that you follow this path with us and tell us which land you are listening from. I ended the call. My hand was steady, but my spirit was shaking. The house was quiet. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, a sound that did not care for my pain. All I could hear was his voice. "Our gathering now." I made tea I did not want and walked to the window. That is when I saw it. An envelope on my table, tossed there with the junk that I had not truly seen. I opened it. A bill for his house, due when the new year turns. $1,780. I looked at the number. For 2 full turns of the seasons, my small savings, the money my wife and I had put away like seeds for the winter, I had been sending it to him. My money was the strong wood that kept his family warm. My money was the deep root that held his roof steady against the wind. And now, I was not welcome to sit by the fire that I myself was feeding. It was then the truth showed its face. He did not want me as a father. He wanted me as a spring that never runs dry. I sat down. The paper felt heavy in my hand. It was not ink and numbers. It was a story of betrayal written plain. The memories came, like ghosts in the room. Mornings when I would rise before the sun to build the fire, so he would wake to warmth. The beaded moccasins his mother had made, hanging by the hearth. The smell of her sweetgrass and cedar filling the air. Every post I helped set in that house. Every winter I worked until my hands were cracked and bleeding. It was for him, for his future. And now he tells me to stay home. That night sleep would not come. I lay on my bed, listening to the old house settle and groan in the cold. My wife's picture sat on the dresser, her smile frozen in time, wearing the red shawl I bought her at the fall market so many years ago. I whispered to her in the darkness, "What would you say to him, my love? What path would you show him?" The silence that answered was heavier than the snow on the roof. The next morning I moved through the day like a shadow. I made tea. I shoveled the snow from my path. But the fire in my chest was not from the cold. It was from the burn of disrespect. Later, I drove to the trading post for salt and kerosene. On the way back, I drove down his road. His house had bright lights on the porch. A green wreath hung on the door. Through the glass, I saw my grandchildren, their small forms dancing around the tree. His wife carried food to the table. It was a picture of a happy, perfect family. A picture I was not invited to be a part of. My hands tightened on the wheel. A part of me wanted to stop, to walk to that door and ask him to say those words to my face. But I did not. I kept driving. The snow hissed under the tires like a snake in the quiet. Back in my own house, I opened the old wooden box where I keep my papers. I spread them on the table. Bank slips, receipts, all in my name. $1,820 for the hunter's moon. $1,780 for the frost moon. Over and over. His life, his warmth, his stability, all balanced on my old shoulders. I took a pen and drew a line under the last payment. My hand was shaking, not from age, but from a cold, clear anger. It was then I understood. I was the deep foundation he stood on, and he had just tried to kick me out of the very home I had built. Without my roots, his tree would fall. I folded the bill and put it in my pocket. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The lines on my face seemed deeper, not from time, but from this new wound. And for the first time in many winters, I did not just feel old. I felt something else. I felt necessary. If my son thought he could erase me from the family fire while still taking the wood I provide to keep it lit, he was wrong. I spoke to my own reflection in the glass, my breath making a cloud on the cold pane. Not this time. After that phone call, the winter seemed to grow colder with every breath. The snow piled high against my door, but it could not bury the ache that had settled in my bones. I spent the next morning in silence, moving through my house like a ghost. The walls held memories I no longer wished to see. Mornings long ago when the children were small, when my wife was still with us. She used to hang medicine bags by the hearth, one for each of us, stitched with beads. Mine always had the symbol of the bear in bright red thread. Now the hearth was bare, and my name might as well have been carved from the family stone. I could not eat. The oatmeal sat cold as I walked from room to room, carrying that mortgage bill. It was like a piece of evidence I could not set down. Every time I looked at that number, $1,780, due in the new year, the truth cut a little deeper. I was not just left out. I was being thrown away. The nights were the hardest. The old house groaned in the wind, but the silence inside was heavier. I lay in my bed, staring at the darkness, listening for a voice that would not come again in this life. My wife's picture on the dresser seemed to watch me with a quiet sadness. She had walked on 5 winters ago, but in that moment the loss felt new. Why did we work so hard for him? I whispered into the dark. Why did we save every extra dollar? Why did we build if this is where the path ends? My hand trembled as I opened the drawer by my bed. Inside was a bundle of receipts and bank slips, years of proof that I had carried my son when he could not carry himself. I spread them across the blanket like sacred stones, the dates and numbers staring back at me. November 1st, $1,820. October 1st, $1,780. Month after month, my signature on every line. Each slip of paper felt like a scar, proof of a loyalty that had been mistaken for a given. I pressed my palm against one as if I could press the hurt away, but it only grew. For 3 nights I did not sleep. I found myself in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at the shadows, the ticking clock the only sound. I poured a small bit of whiskey into a cup, something I had not done since my wife's passing. It burned, but it did not warm me. On the 4th night, something shifted. I had pulled out the old photo albums, perhaps to punish myself. There we were, me in my work shirt, dust on my shoulders from the sight. My wife in her red shawl, holding our boy on her lap. Behind us, the house looked small but proud. I remembered taking extra jobs, mending other people's fences in the biting cold, just to make sure our own was strong. And now, my son wanted me to stay home. While he celebrated under the roof my money kept whole. That thought cracked something open inside me. At first it was only grief. Then it hardened into something else. Resolve. By the 18th day of the long snow's moon, a Sunday, I finally left the house with a clear path. I drove to the store, more to escape the silence than for supplies. I picked up milk, bread, and some eggs. And that is when it happened. In the next aisle I heard his voice. My son. I froze, my heart beating a slow, heavy drum. He was talking to someone on his phone, loud enough for the spirits to hear. "The old man is old," he said. "He won't be around forever. Once he's gone, the house is mine." The words hit me. I stepped back behind a tall shelf of dry goods. Every muscle in my body went tight. I listened as he laughed, a light, careless sound. "Yeah, it's just a matter of time," he said. "He's still paying, but once it's over, everything is set." I gripped the handle of the shopping cart so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to walk around that corner. I wanted to stand before him and ask him to say those words again. But I did not. I stood in the shadow, letting his words carve themselves into my memory. When he walked past the end of the aisle moments later, he did not even see me. He just walked out, whistling, as if he owned the world. I stood there for a long time, staring at the boxes of food, trying to swallow the stone in my throat. That night back home, I spread the receipts on my table again. But this time I did not see them as scars. I saw them as truths, as weapons. My sorrow had not left me, but it had a new companion. I was not a ghost in my own house anymore. I was a man with a fire in his chest. I whispered to the empty room, "If you think I am just an old man, powerless and fading, you are about to learn how wrong you are." The mortgage bill sat on the table, glowing in the lamplight. It no longer looked like a burden. It looked like a key. And I decided in that moment if my son wanted a gathering without me, then he would get one. But it would not be the one he imagined. By the time the calendar showed December 19th, I was no longer just a grieving father. I was planning. The pain had sharpened into a point. It made my hands steady. That morning, I put on my heaviest coat. I tucked the mortgage bill into the inside pocket and drove to the brick building in town, a place I had not walked into for many winters. The office of my lawyer. The woman at the desk knew me. Or perhaps she just knew the look in an old man's eyes when he has walked a long way with a heavy heart. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice soft. "He will see you." Inside, the air smelled of old books and strong coffee. My lawyer, Mr. Halperin, was older than me, but his eyes were still sharp. He had helped me when my wife walked on, and his counsel was good. "What brings you here, old friend, so close to the gathering time?" he asked. I did not speak. I simply laid the mortgage bill on the polished wood of his desk. "Tell me what happens," I said, my voice steady, "if I stop paying." He raised his gray eyebrows. "Stop paying?" He knew I had carried this for years. "I know," I said, "but the paper. It has both our names, my son's and mine. What happens if I walk away?" Mr. Halperin put his hands together, thinking. Then he nodded slow. "Without your payment," he said, "the bank will begin foreclosure. They will send a notice within 30 days. Unless your son can pay the full amount, he will lose the house." Those words, they did not bring me joy, but they brought me balance. For the first time in weeks, I felt the heavy weight shift from my shoulders. I leaned forward. "So, the house only stands because I hold it up." "That is correct," he said. "Without you, nothing holds." I left his office with the papers in a folder. The cold wind bit my face as I walked back to my truck. My boots crunched on the ice, but I felt taller. On the way home, I stopped at the store again. I was not hungry. I just wanted to see if the spirits would show me another sign. They did. As I walked down the aisle with the frozen foods, I heard his voice again. My son. He was with a friend this time. His tone was full of pride and arrogance. "My father's paying the mortgage," he said. "Always has, always will. The old man is too soft to quit." His friend laughed, and my son laughed too, loud and careless. I stood by the frozen peas, my heart pounding a slow, hard beat. Those words were not just disrespect. They were proof. He was betting on my love as a weakness. When I got home, I pulled out a fresh pad of paper. I started writing down the dates, the amounts, the payments. November 1st, $1,820. December 1st, $1,780. Next to each one, I wrote a single word, me. The receipts were no longer just paper. They were my story. They were my truth. That night, sleep did not come. But this time it was not grief that kept me awake. It was a clear mind. I took out my phone and I began to take pictures of every receipt, one by one. A digital record. I even took a picture of the mortgage bill with the January 3rd due date circled in red ink. By the next morning, I had a new folder on my desk. I labeled it simply, Proof. On December 21st, 2 days before the gathering eve, I met my son's wife at a coffee shop. She had called to check on me, perhaps from guilt. I decided to test the waters. "How are the children?" I asked. She smiled, but her eyes were nervous. "They are good, excited for the gathering." Then her smile faded. "Look, I am sorry about. He just wants things his way." I nodded slowly. "His way." She hesitated, stirring her drink, and then she spoke the words that sealed the path. "He told the neighbors the house is already his," she said, "that it's just a matter of time." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face calm. "Already his?" She looked down, knowing she had said too much. "No," I said, my voice gentle. "You have said enough." When I left the shop, I had all the confirmation I needed. He was not just cutting me out of the holiday. He was trying to cut me out of my own life. That night at my desk, I looked at the folder labeled proof. I took out the spare key to his house, the one he gave me years ago, in case of emergencies. I held it in my hand, feeling the cold metal, the sharp edges. An idea, like a seed, began to take root in my mind. The time was not yet right, but it would be soon. By December 22nd, the plan was forming. It was not built of anger, but of stone. Every bill, every receipt, every careless word I had overheard. They were the stones, and I was laying them one by one, building something stronger than grief. I was building a boundary, and the strongest part, I would not have to raise my voice. All I had to do was stop paying, stop protecting, stop carrying a man who thought he was too good to set a place at the table for his own father. I closed my eyes that night with a strange, cold calm. For the first time in weeks, I slept. But when I woke the next morning, the resolve was sharper than before. It now had a direction. My son had no idea what was coming. By December 29th, the snow was deep, covering everything. But inside my house, I felt lighter. The decision was made. The January 3rd payment was suspended. The paperwork was filed. My lawyer confirmed the bank would move quickly. All I had to do was wait. The strange thing about this kind of justice is that it doesn't roar. It hums. It is the quiet in your chest when you know you are holding the truth. Each day that passed, I moved with a steady patience. My son had no idea the ground beneath his feet was crumbling. On the morning of December 30th, I walked into the diner for breakfast. The place smelled of coffee and bacon. As I slid into a booth, I overheard two men at the counter. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "He's been saying the house is his already." They were talking about my son. His pride had spread through the town like a sickness. People were noticing. I sipped my coffee and hid a small smile. By the time the truth came out, the gossip would catch fire. Later that day, I saw him at the hardware store. He spotted me, and his face tightened before he put on a false smile. "Hey, father," he said, too loud. "Everything good?" I studied him. His eyes moved quickly. He was nervous. "Fine," I said simply. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, you're still paying January's bill, right?" I let the silence stretch, watching him. "We'll see," I said. His jaw tightened. "Father, don't play games. You know how important this is." I leaned in. "More important to you than to me," I said. Then I walked away, leaving him standing there. That night I sat by the fire with the proof folder on my lap. I looked through the documents, the stamped receipts, the affidavit from Joe, the $4,500 watch slip, the $2,200 transfer. Each piece felt like a stone ready to be thrown. By December 31st, the tension was thick. My phone rang 3 times. My son, trying to sound casual, asking if I'd join them for New Year's Eve. I ignored every call. At midnight, I stood at my window, watching fireworks burst over the cold, dark town. Alone, yes, but not defeated. On January 1st, he showed up at my house. No warning, just a knock. When I opened it, he stood there, his face pale. "Father, can we talk?" I stepped aside. He sat at my table, tapping his fingers. "Look," he said, "I know we had issues, but the payment is due in 2 days. I just need to know you'll cover it just this once." I folded my hands. "And then what? You cut me out again. You tell the neighbors the house is already yours." He blinked, startled. "What? What are you talking about?" "I hear things," I said quietly. "I hear you've been calling the house yours, that once I'm gone, it's all yours." He looked away, his face red. "People talk." "No," I said, my voice firm. "You talk." The silence stretched. He finally looked at me, his false pride cracking. "Father, please, if you stop now, we lose everything." I leaned back. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you told me there was no place for me at your table. His mouth opened, then shut. He had no answer. He left, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. I stood in the quiet, watching the snow fall, feeling the weight of years finally lift. January 2nd. They called it a holiday dinner, a make-up meal. The air was cold and gray. I showed up at 6 o'clock. I brought a simple pie and my heavy leather briefcase. The pie was for show. The briefcase was for the truth. Inside, the house was warm. The children were running. My daughter-in-law gave me a thin smile, the kind people wear when they are trying to keep the peace. My son stood by the kitchen island, a drink in his hand. When his eyes met mine, his smile faltered. "Father," he said, his voice too friendly, "glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it," I answered. I set the pie down, but I kept the briefcase in my hand. We gathered at the table. He sat at the head as if he had earned it. For a moment it almost felt normal. Then a timer in the kitchen went off and the room fell into a heavy silence. I cleared my throat. "Before we eat," I said, "I brought something." My son's jaw twitched. "Father, maybe we—" I set the briefcase on the table and unlatched it. Inside, in a neat stack, were the bank copies, the mortgage contract, the photo of the watch receipt, and the signed affidavit from Joe. I did not raise my voice. I let the paper do the shouting. "This," I said, sliding the top sheet out, "is November 1st. $1,820, my transfer, bank stamp right there." I laid it in front of him. "This is October 1st. $1,780, my transfer, and this December 1st. $1,780, my transfer." I laid them side by side. The children went still. My son forced a laugh. "Father, come on. It's dinner." "Exactly," I said, meeting his eyes. "A dinner I was not invited to, but my money was." I drew out the next page, the 4x6 photo I had printed. I slid it toward him. "That is a purchase for $4,500 at the jewelry store. On December 14th, the slip was on your desk. A gold watch." Color rose in his neck. "You were in my house," he whispered. "I used my key," I said evenly. "The one you gave me when family still meant something." My daughter-in-law's eyes flashed to him. $4,500, she whispered. "It's not like that," he barked. "Then there is this," I said, lifting the single page with the blue signature. "An affidavit from Joe at the bank. It confirms the last 2 years of payments were mine, and that on December 20th you moved $2,200 into a personal account. Yours only." I tapped the date. 5 days after you told me not to come for Christmas." The room was silent. He stared at the page. "Joe had no right." "He had every right to confirm my payments," I said. My daughter-in-law turned to him, her voice small. "You told me we were tight, that we needed every dollar." He looked away. I was going to fix it." I slid the original mortgage contract into the center of the table. "Here is the part you can't fix," I said. "2 names, 2 signatures required. The house stands because I hold it up. Without me, it does not stand at all." He drew a sharp breath. "You wouldn't." I let the silence do the work. "January 3rd is tomorrow," I said. "That payment, it will not be paid. I have already filed the papers with the bank. The clock starts in the morning." My daughter-in-law covered her mouth. The children stared at their plates. He leaned forward, his voice low. "Father, don't do this, please." I held his gaze. "You told me," I said quietly, "that this was your gathering now. You told the neighborhood the house was already yours. You used my money and you lied to your wife. You forgot who built your foundation." "This is the notice from my lawyer," I said, sliding the last page. "My authorization to continue payments was withdrawn. There is nothing to twist." He sagged in his chair. You want to watch your grandkids lose their home." I turned to the children and softened my voice. "No, I do not want that." Then I looked back at him. "Which is why you will make it right. You will apologize to your wife. You will correct what you told the neighbors, and you will arrange your own payments." His wife spoke, her voice shaking. "Did you really buy a $4,500 watch?" He stared at his plate. "It was, for a bonus." Her chair scraped the floor. "The guys at work don't tuck our children into bed." He stood up so fast his drink tipped over. "You're punishing me because you felt left out of dinner." I stayed seated. "I am drawing a boundary because you made me into a wallet and you called it family. You didn't just leave me out of dinner. You left me out of the truth." I closed the briefcase with a soft click. "I came tonight so you would hear it from me, not from a letter. Tomorrow the notice lands." He lunged for the folder, but I slid it away. "These are copies," I said. "The originals are with my lawyer." For a moment he was all anger. Then something broke. He sank back down, trembling. When he finally spoke, his voice was cracked. "What do you want?" I considered the question. "Respect," I said. "Transparency and the truth told out loud." He swallowed. I can sell the watch." "That's a start," I said. "Call the bank tomorrow. Arrange your own payment for January and every month after. Tell your wife where the money went. Tell your neighbors you were wrong. And tell your kids their grandfather will be welcome at the table when their father remembers how to set it." He stared at me, then he nodded once, barely. "Okay." My daughter-in-law looked at me, a tear on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not blindsiding us with a sheriff." We ate then in an honest silence. The food was cold. When the plates were cleared, I stood and put on my coat. At the door, my son stopped me. He looked smaller. "Dad," he said, his voice rough, if I make it right." "You still have your house," I said, "because you earned it, not because you stole my name to prop it up." "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "January 3rd. Call by noon." I stepped onto the porch. The cold air was clean and sharp. I looked back through the window. My grandchildren were playing. My daughter-in-law was looking at my son, really looking at him for the first time. He was leaning against the counter, his head down, the pride drained out of him. I walked to my truck and set the briefcase on the seat. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since mid-December. He had tried to make me invisible. He'd made a mistake. The thing about foundations is you only notice them when they shift. Justice isn't always a hammer. Sometimes it's a meal where the truth sits in the center of the table and no one can look away. The days that followed were quiet. On January 3rd, I waited for the call. It came exactly at noon. "I made the payment, Father," he said. His voice was flat without the usual bravado. "I sold the watch." "Good," I said. "I called the bank. I set up the transfers. They start next month. I can do it." "I know you can," I replied. "You just chose not to." There was a long pause. "I told my wife everything. She's not happy." "That is a path you must walk together," I said, "not one I will clear for you." He didn't apologize, not then. But he didn't demand either. He had started to speak the truth, and that, for now, was enough. I called my lawyer and confirmed that the bank had received a January payment from my son. I withdrew my freeze order. The house was safe, but the foundation had shifted. He was now standing on his own ground. The rest of the winter was long. I did not visit. He did not call. The silence was different this time. It was not the cold silence of rejection. It was the clear, quiet silence of space. A space where a lesson could finally take root. The seasons turned. The snow melted into spring rivers. The trees grew green again. The world healed itself as it always does. And I healed too. I worked in my garden. I met friends for tea. I lived my life, free of the burden of carrying a man who did not respect the weight. He called me in the late summer. A simple call. He spoke of the grandchildren, how they were growing. He asked about my own garden. He did not ask for money. He asked for nothing. It was the first time he had spoken to me as a son, not as a debtor in many years, but a wound that deep takes more than one season to close. The next December came, another long snow's moon. The air was already biting cold. I was sitting by the fire one evening, the air filled with the scent of cedar and smoke, when the mail arrived. Among the letters was an envelope from my son, a small square card. I opened it slowly. It was a Christmas card. Inside, he had written a single line. "Father, I wasn't expecting you last year, but I could use you this one." I turned the card over in my hands. I studied the handwriting. Use. I waited for the wave of emotion, anger perhaps, or a surge of old pain, but all I felt was clarity, the deep, still wisdom that comes only with age and hard lessons. He had learned nothing. He had only learned to wait. He thought that 1 year of separation was enough time to forget. He still saw me not as a man, but as a resource, a tool to be picked up when convenient, a wallet, a safety net. I took the card, sealed it back in its envelope with a smooth press of my thumb, and set it on the shelf next to the old mortgage receipts. I did not need to read any more than that single, careless line. I was not a piece of furniture to move in and out of the picture. I was a man who had drawn a line in the sand, and I would not cross it again. That Christmas, I cooked myself a small dinner: roast chicken, wild rice, and a glass of the good, heavy cider. I set the table for one and ate slowly, savoring the quiet. Outside, I could hear the sounds of life, of families gathering, but I didn't feel alone. I felt free. When the fire had burned down to embers and the cup was empty, I opened my journal and wrote one final line beneath the one from last year. He asked if he could use me again, but I am no longer his to use. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet of the season wrap around me like a warm blanket. The greatest irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I was excluded from his table because he was too arrogant to see my worth. A year later, he wanted me back, not as family but as leverage. And by refusing, I gave myself the only gift that mattered: my dignity. I whispered into the stillness, the same way I had whispered a year before, not this time. And with that, the story was finished. He had learned the hard way that you cannot cut the roots from the tree and expect the fruit to keep growing. I am old, but I am not soft, and I am finally free. Call to action. If this story of boundaries and respect spoke to your own heart, if you too have learned that love must have limits, please let us know. Hit the like button to show your support. Subscribe to the Elder's Voice to hear more stories of life, loss, and the lessons that only time can teach. And in the comments below, tell us, what is the hardest lesson your own family ever taught you? Your story matters. Join our gathering.